From unknown parts of metropolitan New York City, I am the hip and the
Yes, hello everybody. Welcome to this very special edition of Hip and the Lip, as Hip and the Lip are live together. Unknown part of metropolitan New York City. It should be not unknown parts because we're in one part today. That's right. So good evening or good morning, good afternoon, whenever you might be listening. New York Sports Podcast, that's what we are, and so much going on. Who is the least of the worst teams in New York? Would it be the Giants? Would it be the Yankees who keep ascending? Of course, the Mets and the Jets stuck at the bottom, along with the Knicks, Islanders, and everybody else, and the Nets and all of them. So, what say you, Mr. Hip? How much of that amazing fight did you see last week? Of course, when I say that, I mean the Yankee-Tiger Brawl.
I saw it in my dreams, of course. Yes, thinking about you, about the show, being in person together. Look, like us on iTunes, rate us on iTunes, or on your Android device. You could listen to us on Stitcher, amongst other apps. So, look, tonight we're going to shift the agenda priority a bit here and focus on fantasy football first. This is when all the drafts are happening, all the auctions are happening, hopefully more auctions. I encourage any listener to try an auction. As once you do an auction, you'll never want to do a draft again because you can pretty much get any player you want. So we'll get to that. We'll get to the Yankees. We'll get to the Giants. We'll get to the Jets. And whatever else.
Indeed.
Let this sink in. This is episode 69.
That's
folks.
right, 69.
So what better to do our first episode side by side for episode 69. I'll leave the rest of imagination up to the listeners here. So let's get right to it. Fantasy football. Now, I just had my first fantasy football auction last night. I understand you've already completed at least one.
Yep, just the one so far, but I cannot wait for the Hip to reveal his steep sleepers for all of us, since we are in a league together as well.
And because we have a podcast, we're obviously experts in fantasy football auction sleeper strategy.
It does make us automatic experts, just like anybody that does a podcast and talks about fantasy football. Obviously, we have all this inside information, so you wanna hear what we've got to say
right now.
Yes.
So look, I can't emphasize enough how much one should really try an auction. I mean, the bottom line is you can get any player you want. So if there's a guy that you just absolutely must have, you're not restricted by getting getting picked. The guy getting picked right before.
It was introduced to auctions by Mr. Hip here many moons ago. And if you remember this correctly, our first group auction together was in one of our loyal listeners' basements for fantasy basketball back in the day. Wesley Person for $11. What a steal. Yeah. So, yes, auctions are the way to go. Drafts, there is miles traveled. I'm sorry, take one tourist. I take a quarterback high, blah, blah, blah. That's all fine. Auctions are so much more entertaining. They're so much more fun. And there's so much more strategy involved. As Mr. Hip said, you can get any player that you want. If you have your heart set on Kareem Hunt, you can go out and get Kareem Hunt, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, you can get him if you have to have him. Or anybody else. Maybe Josh Doxson, I have to have him. Or maybe the amazing Bilal Powell, I have to have him. So whoever it might be.
But the basic format for an auction, for those that have not tried one, is each team gets a set budget. Let's just call it the standard amount's $260. Okay, and then instead of having a draft order, there is an auction order. So let's say I'm the first pick. I nominate any player that I could potentially buy on my roster. I nominate him. So let's say Rex Burkhead, $1, and then there's successive bidding. And this can all be done online, ESPN, Yahoo, etc. They all have the auction format capability. And there's a countdown, like 10 seconds. And if nobody bids up Rex Burkhead to $2, he's on my team. Now I have $259 left. Then Eric, let's say the Lip. Let's say it's his turn next. He nominates a player, and so on and so forth. And the typical format is that every play you fill up your entire roster, including bench spots, with players that you purchase. Now, there could be variations where you're only buying players that are for your active spots, and then you have like a snake draft for your reserves. And there's there's a lot of different variances to it, but that's the basic format. So really, you can get any player that you want. Now, as far as how strategy goes, that's another interesting piece, because we've been in a league together now for I think it's 8 years running, and it's been an auction league since day one, a fantasy football league. And what's so balanced about our league is that there's a handful of people that spend a lot of money aggressively up front on like the top name guys.
G-Man.
There's people that kind of are steady throughout, where they're just kind of looking for what they perceive as value picks throughout the auction. And then there's a few people that end up with money towards the end, and they're like bidding against each other on the few premium picks that are still out there. And so, I mean, as far as the strategy goes, there's no one-size-fits-all approach, and every league is different. You don't know what your league mates are going to do. Each individual league has different philosophies. So to me, that's what makes it challenging every time. Even if you're doing it with the same people every year, it's a new set of fresh ranks and players like the Kareem Hunts and the Rex Burkheads and the Mike Gillisseys of the world, and you just it's pretty much a free-for-all. So.
That's what's great, is that you just never know. Like, even if you go in with the plan, sometimes you just get caught up in the excitement and you start bidding, and you say, some people can be disciplined and they stick to their plan. I'm not going to go up more than this on this guy or this on this guy. But the auction it takes on a life of itself once it gets going, regardless of what people's strategies or whatever the plans that they had in mind going in. But sometimes you get impulsive, sometimes you get caught up in the bidding, and you have a guy that you kind of really want, but should I go higher than this? And then you say, the hell with it, I'm just going to go and bypass and exceed what I originally had scheduled for him. So
speaking of that, let's talk about guys that we may get caught up in the moment on during an auction, or guys that we're probably going to see get called and nominated, and we'll just probably let somebody else grab them. So we're going to do a sleepers and busts segment right now. We're going to go position by position. So we're going to name. We're going to start with quarterback, and we'll each name a sleeper and a bust, give a little commentary, and then pass the baton to the other person. Then we'll go to the next position. So this is really all being done on the fly based on the current information that we have now in the fantasy world. Which kind of makes it more interesting. So here is a this is going out on a limb for a I'm going bust pick first at quarterback, Russell Wilson.
Wow, I did not see that coming.
Look, now he is an immense talent. Don't get me wrong, but when you think about the quality of quarterback depth available in the fantasy community, I think that when you look at his relative ranking, which he's probably going around the 6th or 7th overall quarterback, I just think there's more question marks surrounding especially his offensive line. That's what really bothers me the most. And we saw this happen to him last year, where he just couldn't overcome the crappiness of that offensive line, and it led to some really disastrous outings. Now, he is an immense talent, but I just think that there's more question marks surrounding Russell Wilson, and I just don't know if I'm willing to pay what the market price is for him.
Yeah, and I'll just comment on him. We talked about Thomas Rawls last week. We talked about that offensive line for Seattle, which, if you read everything that you read, it has not at all improved. So it has a major concern. Wilson, actually, I thought played pretty badly in that wild card. I think back to that wild card game last year in the playoffs, and he was just so wildly inaccurate. And that's the thing with Wilson; he's never been the most accurate guy. Obviously, he's a guy that can make plays with his legs. I actually, and I'm not going to necessarily agree with the hip on everything here. Here, I will agree, though. I am not a big Russell Wilson believer right now, or I'll rephrase. I'm not someone that's sold that Russell Wilson's an automatic top 5 or 6 quarterback. Is he still going to give you top, at least top 15 type numbers? I don't see any reason why he won't. Again, very talented, but I think overall that offensive line's a concern. I think their wide receiving core, though, it's good. There's still question marks, and I agree. I'm tend to downgrade Mr. Russell Wilson.
All right, so this is. I was thinking of going Cam Newton, but he's not. Obviously, he's not a sleeper. He's just a guy that I think is going to outperform his ADP. He's just had such a great track record as a fantasy quarterback. He had a down year, and he's underpriced. How about Jay Cutler? So
isn't he in the booth? He's broadcasting games. Oh, that's right. The other guy was injured, and they brought in Jay in Miami. That's right.
So look, Jay. They're not going to Matt Moore. I mean, he's not the answer. Jay Cutler leaves it out all on the field. He's going to sling it. He's got an up and coming player in Devontae Parker who just fits Jay Cutler's quarterback profile really well. And isn't he playing with Adam Gase? Isn't he reunited with?
He was reunited with this old coach Adam Gase.
So I just think that look, he's going for nothing, next to nothing, and I mean when you consider the price and look, am I saying he's going to be a top 5 quarterback? No, but I think he could be a top 16, maybe 12 if everything clicks right. I mean, look, he's not going to really run, but I think he's going to be better than what Tannehill really. I mean, Tannehill was just such a their supporting cast is. I think he's got the tools. It's interesting with the Landry situation, and there's rumors coming out of Miami that they're looking to trade him, but Miami denies it. But the reporters say that other teams are validating it. So I don't know how that's going to work. But they got the Kenny Stills, I think, is on the team too. So they got 2 downfield threats. Jay Cutler.
I think it actually changed the fantasy landscape dramatically, at least in Miami, when Tannehill went down. The one thing I'm disappointed about is we won't be able to hear John Gruden say Ryan Tannehill anymore, at least for this year. We'll see if Tannehill is now done in Miami. Not that Cutler is a long-term answer there, just a stopgap at least for this year. I mean, Cutler is at his best, he was a solid, if unspectacular quarterback, extremely talented, a cannon for an arm, one of the biggest arms in the league, and he still possesses that arm. But again, he's just very maddening with his inconsistent play. Did he play well with Gase? Yes. Is there a reason to have some mild optimism for him? Yes. Do I think he can be a top 20 quarterback? Maybe. I think he has a couple interesting weapons in Devontae Parker, who I think definitely is going to shoot up boards now over Jarvis Landry, since he's going to go down the field, I think, a lot more than Tannehill would have, since Tannehill threw a really bad deep ball. So, I mean, I think he'll be better than Deshaun Kaiser, but do I think he's going to be a top fantasy quarterback? I don't think there's any chance of that, despite being in an offense that he's, I guess, comfortable in with Gase. But
all right, so now you take a stab. One in no order, whether it's a bust or a sleeper or whatever.
All right, so I'm doing quarterbacks here? What?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to give you I guess I can go Josh McCown, named starting quarterback of the Jets, if you didn't hear. Yes, but I won't do that. No, I'm going to go Dak Prescott.
As a what?
As a faller.
Okay.
At least bust from where he is ranked. Every single rankings list, you see him sometimes top 10, sometimes even higher, top 8. I've seen him, maybe as a Dak Prescott guy. He played in an offense last year that was tailored perfectly to him. It didn't require him to make any tough throws. He had a wall for an offensive line, rarely saw any pressure. Did he have a very good year? Absolutely. I mean, his numbers, you can never have predicted in a million years after Romo went down that Dak was going to put up those numbers. Do I think he's going to be a complete bust where he's going to throw more interceptions than touchdowns? No. But I think that in that offense, unless everything goes perfectly like it did last year, there's just no way he is going to reduplicate those numbers. I see him honestly falling maybe even to like 20, like around that range, like 20, 18 to 22 range. I can absolutely see him falling down there. Do not reach for him. Do not spend an eighth of your auction money for him thinking, oh, he's going to do even better than last year. It'll be a colossal mistake if you do. That offensive line, they're not going to play as well as they did last year just because it's impossible. Plus, there's no Ezekiel Elliott. Well, we assume no Elliott for the first 6 weeks. I just cannot see Dak Prescott reduplicating those numbers. Give me Prescott falling to, again, 18 to 22 range. So there's Dak. If Mr. Hip has anything to add.
Well, I kind of saw it. You kind of saw it all happen against, was it Green Bay?
Well, he played pretty well against Green Bay, but think about the Giant games. The Giants absolutely stifled him. He looked every bit the rookie quarterback he was, especially in the second game in December of last year. Against a good defense, Dak Prescott looked terrible. He was awful on third downs. He had trouble making his reads. Green Bay had one of maybe the worst defense of all time in the playoffs last year. They had nobody. So he played okay in that game, but I mean that's part of my reasoning. If you agree, disagree.
No, I'm not high on him myself. The thing is, Elliott, there's talk now that he is positioning himself to go to court over the suspension. So if that's the case, then Elliott's playing, and that might change your tune a bit. So it's, I think, still somewhat unclear.
It's up in the air, and I think, and even if Elliott wasn't suspended, I would say the same thing. I'm not sold that Prescott is going to reduplicate his numbers from last year. I'm just not. I didn't see an overly talented thrower of the football. He didn't really have any kind of rapport with Dez Bryant. Made a lot of those, short, intermediate throws. And yeah, can you dink and dunk your way to a pretty good season? Yeah, but I think you can target other guys that are going to give you better weeks. And I just don't see Prescott reduplicating numbers. I think he's absolutely going to fall. He's going to throw more interceptions this year. He's not going to go another year where he's throwing 4 interceptions. I'm sorry, he's just not that good. And I think if you're looking at him and all the rankings had him, you're going to be very disappointed. So does that mean you avoid him? No, but be careful in your evaluation of Prescott.
All right. Let's move on. Running back.
Should I give a right? Do I have to
sorry. You got to give a quarterback riser. Jump the gun. Yes.
All right, so I would love to say Andy Dalton, but we talked about him already, so we won't do that. Let's see here, a riser. Actually, Cutler would have been a good one because he's very down on the list. I'm actually going to give you Trevor Siemian. I actually think that Siemian is a little bit. I actually always make fun of his name. If you look at the pronunciation of his last name or look at the way his last name is spelled, you can very easily have fun with that.
Episode 69.
So when he has a bad game, I use my pronunciation, and when he has a good game, I'll call him Siemian. Siemian, actually is a talented thrower of the football. There's a reason that the Broncos had named Siemian the starting quarterback as quickly as they did. Has Lynch been bad? Yes. But Lynch is also a former first-round pick who also has a cannon for an arm that they very easily could have at least let that play out through camp. They like Siemian a lot. He's got a very good receiving core. Is he a guy that's going to put up – is he going to dazzle you with his numbers? No. But he is definitely a guy that can – with the talented wide receiver core that he does with Thomas and Sanders and a pretty good running game and an improved offensive line, I think that Siemian is going to play much better than where his rankings are. You're not going to see him anywhere above like 23 or 24, if that. Right now he's like in that 23, 24 to like 27 range. He'll be better than that.
Paxton Lynch is out now multiple weeks for a shoulder injury as well.
I did not see that. So there you go. So if there was any threat to his job, if he plays badly for a couple games, now that's gone. So thank you, Mr. Hip. Trevor Siemian, again, not spectacular, but will put up solid numbers. He's a talented thrower of the football. Give me Siemian in the modestly 18 to 20 range, maybe even 15, 16 around there.
Okay. All right. Moving on to running back. I'll characterize this more as a shy away as opposed to a bust. Again, it's relative to where this player sits. The starting running back for the Los Angeles Chargers.
The LA Clippers? Oh, LAC is LA Chargers now.
Melvin Gordon, shy away, 20 carries inside the 5-yard line last year, averaged under 4 yards a carry. He's not built to be a bruising bulldozer running back. He's just not. Either he's not going to hold up or he's going to tire early in the season. The workload opportunity is there. I just don't think he's built for being what is he, going the 4th, 5th, or 6th running back? I just don't see him returning that level of value. His body is just not really cut out for the role that they're carving out for him. So that's why it's pretty short and sweet. But I'm not a fan of Melvin Gordon this year.
Here's a question: who else is in that San Diego and that was not intentional, I promise. So who else is in that LA or Carson City backfield that might take carries away from him?
Brandon Oliver,
the former Buffalo guy,
and
yes.
Andre Williams, obviously.
That's right. We did talk about Andre Williams. That's right.
Yeah,
but there you go. He's still going to get the workload. Is he a great back? I agree. He's not a great back at all. Watching him, he doesn't have any kind of explosiveness. At least not the type that you see like on a LaShawn McCoy or a David Johnson, one of the top backs, or Le'Veon Bell. But he's not a true bulldozer, but I think
he's not a
good goal line runner.
Oh, and he's not a out sprint the defense runner either.
No,
he
he's
doesn't
not
do any of those things. So I don't know. I just feel like it's going to factor on opportunity. He's going to need a volume of opportunities to return the value. And look, is it set up for that to happen? Yes, and that's why he's going where he is. But I just don't think he's I think too many things have to go well for it to actually
things have to break right for him. No, I agree. PPR league, is he more valuable, less valuable?
I don't know. There's talk of Brandon Oliver being kind of like a third down back.
All right.
He has the receiving ability.
We saw him torch the Jets a few years ago. Remember?
Brandon Oliver's not a guy that's going to be a 20 carry a week type of running back, but
he's smaller than me.
But he could be a poor man's Danny Woodhead, and that could be enough to sap the PPR type of value. Bring down Melvin Gordon a notch.
No, I agree. I think Melvin Gordon is good enough to still be maybe a potential top 10 back because of the volume, but is he a spectacular back? Not by any stretch. All right.
Okay, so a riser. How about go down the list a little bit here?
Thomas Rawls, yes. Lip gave his seals approval last week.
Here's a guy that's just underappreciated. This is somewhat PPR contingent. Darren Sproles. Okay.
Interesting.
If you look at where Darren Sproles has finished in PPR leagues in the last 3 years, he's been right around on average, like a low RB3. Okay. Low to mid RB3. Now, look, Darren Sproles is not getting 15 carries a game. But the Philadelphia offense is set up to be a pass-heavy team. I don't care that they have LeGarrette Blount. He's not the answer. He had 18 touchdowns last year, and that's why people are off of Sproles. They think that Blount's going to just step in and repeat last year's success. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. He doesn't have Tom Brady and company to gift him holes in the and running lanes because they have to guard the pass. Philadelphia is going to move the ball in the air, and they're going to be an up-tempo team, and I think Darren Sproles is going to carve out a bigger role than people realize. And so I don't think he's going at a price that is even close to what he realized last year. And I think he has the potential to outperform his numbers from last year. So Darren Sproles.
Right. Well, they have Smallwood also, right? So and Blunt, there was actually talk of them cutting him.
I think that's
I think that's nonsense. I actually that's an interesting pick. I mean, he's definitely not a guy you're going to be targeting in the higher rounds or going to be spending more than like $2 on at the end of your auction. But no, Sproles is an interesting pick because we have seen him put up, especially in PPR leagues. If you're in a PPR league, you're definitely going to be paying a lot closer attention to him. If you're not, maybe not as valuable. Smallwood, he's been talked as a guy that can maybe get a few more carries in that offense. If Blunt just looks like he just can't move to save his life. But yeah, Blunt, he would actually be a good guy to put down your list because last year was a career year by a mile. No way.
Is that your guy for your down running back? Or you got somebody else? You're up.
Oh, that's right. So, all right. So you gave a faller first and a riser. I guess I'll go the opposite route and give a riser. All right, Duke Johnson Jr. Now, Duke Johnson is a guy that for years we have heard talked about as a potential sleeper. If you're in a PPR league, he's going to, he might catch 90 or 100 balls this year, blah, blah, blah. And it hasn't happened. Has he had good years? Yes. But he hasn't had that spectacular season that you've always been primed, hoping for if you've targeted him as a late round sleeper or as a $2 sleeper in your auction league. This year, I am going to predict will be the year for Mr. Johnson. Why? First off, DeShone Kizer is quarterback in Cleveland. They are going to baby him as much. This is like the Jets. This is hey, we're not going to contend this year. We're not going to compete this year. We have our quarterback of the future, we hope, in Cleveland. We're just going to try and groom him, try and protect him as much as possible, build up his confidence. What does that mean? Lots and lots of checkdowns, and I guarantee you, Isaiah Crowell, he had a nice year last year. I actually think that even if he is the starting back in the early going, you might even see Duke Johnson usurp his position there. I am not a big Crowell guy. He'll get carries, but he is not going to be a 20 to 25 carry guy. And Duke Johnson, I think, is going to take some carries away, and he will get a lot of receptions this year. The coaching staff likes him a lot. I just think that this is finally the year that he is going to put out a really, really good performance overall, beat all of his numbers, have a career year, beat all of his numbers that you've seen over the last few years. Again, PPR more valuable. I'm not saying he's going to shoot up and be a top 20 back, but definitely much higher than all the rankings have him right now. Give me Mr. Johnson.
Is there any concern that playing with a more mobile quarterback will result in fewer checkdowns? I mean, I think most scrambling quarterbacks are less inclined to do running back dump-offs, just as a general proposition.
No, it's a fair point. And I guess the one thing I didn't mention is that I think you're also going to see Cleveland use Johnson in some splitting him out wide sets.
It's a counterpoint.
Yes. Well, that's something I should have mentioned also. it's not just going to be, I said check down. So that obviously means he's in the backfield. He lines up in the backfield with Kaiser, and out he sprints, and then he hits him, for 4 or 5 yards down the field. I think you're going to see him also I think you're going to see him split out wide, whether in the slot, whether out wide. I think that Cleveland is going to use him a lot more this year in the passing game, not just necessarily out of the backfield. All right.
So who is your faller?
Right. So the faller, let's see here. All right. I got what I think is an easy one. I am actually surprised he hasn't fallen down more of these lists. Now I could go with the rookie who these rookies though, it's tough to know exactly how they're going to be used. So it's easy just to say, well, this rookie is ranked too high, especially after last year. Now rookies are all the craze. I'm going to go a different route. Lamar Miller in Houston. I am not a Lamar Miller guy. He was supposed to break out last year. Everything that you heard was that he was going to break out. He's now the every down back. He's finally away from Miami, and he's going to, surpass 1,400 yards, and we didn't see it happen. Did he have a nice year? Yeah. Is he going to have a nice year again? I would say probably, but I don't think that Lamar Miller is going to be the 5th or 12th to 15th ranked back, which is where you're seeing him in most ranking lists. First off, that's not a good offense in Houston. We don't even know who's starting quarterback there yet. I don't think that who they bring in now? Houston?
Deshaun Watson.
That's right. Well, another running back though.
Oh, Donta Foreman.
That's right, Donta Foreman. Apparently, he's like all the craze now. Also, as a super sleeper. But I think he may legitimately take some carries away from Miller, make that more of a committee.
Lamar Miller never showed the explosiveness that you were hoping to see when he left Miami, and the job was essentially his to take, and he just never really took it last year. He was kind of mediocre when you watched him. There was nothing about him that really made you think that this guy's going to have a handful of really good years. So,
I agree, and that's why I'm shocked that he's ranked as highly as he is. You would have thought that last year would have made people a lot more skeptical of his abilities, and that despite the fact that he will be getting carries there, and he's a guy that I'm not saying that you shouldn't own him if you can get him for later in the draft or for a good value, but I just don't see anything there that's going to show me that he is going to be an every down back in Houston. Plus, again, not a good offense, and will lose carries to Donta Foreman or whatever his name is. So, all right, Lamar Miller down.
Okay, all right. Moving on to receiver. Right? Did you said
did the two?
You did the two.
All right.
All right. So wide receivers. Ted Ginn Jr., Ohio State. So look, all right. So Ted Ginn Jr. is the WR2 outside receiver on New Orleans, a top passing team year in, year out. Drew Brees is still there. Yes, they do still have Michael Thomas, but Brandon Cooks is gone. I don't see Willie Snead's role really expanding. He's more of a slot guy, and who better to be throwing bombs down the field to you than Mr. Drew Brees? I mean, look, Ted Ginn is going as maybe as a WR4/5. And look, he's not going to be getting 8 catches a game. That's not his style. So this is more for a standard league. But you know what? He is a good maybe you're pushing it a little bit as your 3rd receiver, but if you got him as your 4th receiver, I'd say that's a pretty good pick. If you got him as your 5th receiver, outstanding. And I think you can with the way that he's being drafted right now. I really see a big opportunity for him to far outperform where he's being selected.
That's an interesting one, and I like Teddy Ginn also. I think he has the case of the dropsies every now and again. We saw it a lot more earlier in his career in Carolina. He still might have that affliction in New Orleans, but you love him in that offense. I mean, he is, I think, tailor-made for that offense. Again, like you said, not a guy that's going to give you a lot of volume in catches, so PPR, not as valuable, but definitely a guy that Drew Brees is going to be targeting down the field, and definitely a guy that you can, especially considering, the stigma attached to Ted Ginn, a veteran in the league that's never had a great season. So I think sometimes that follows guys in the fantasy world, and people tend to undervalue those guys. So I like him. He's a very interesting pick and will be potentially very explosive in that offense.
All right. So we're going to stick with the same Ohio State University as far as a player we're down on, and that is Terrell Pryor.
I know you were going there.
Terrell Pryor has no inside route game at all. He's completely an outside physical receiver, and he has so little experience at the position. For him to be going as a top, I've seen experts rank them as their 8th best wide receiver. I just can't. Look, he's got a good quarterback throw who's going to sling it. I get it. But, now he's with Washington. But I just don't think he's polished enough to bring back a top 10 wide receiver value that you have to pay to get this guy. I'd take a pass and let somebody else take a chance on him at that. I'd rather have the Doug Baldwins and the Amari Coopers and the Keenan Allens all day over Terrell Pryor. Not even close.
Interesting. Pryor but the one thing I'll say about Pryor, I saw him last year play the Giants, and he at times abused Janoris Jenkins, who had an all-pro season. Pryor is extremely talented, and that's the reason why he is going as high as he is. Does he have maybe a lower floor? Potentially, but he is in a good offense. Like you said, he has a quarterback that's going to sling it to him. He is a very physically gifted player, and we saw him put up really good numbers last year. And I think he improved his consistency as the year went along. Does that mean that you're going to elevate him over some of the guys that you named? Not necessarily, but I think he is definitely a guy that has the talent to maybe fulfill some of the expectations that the fantasy experts are levying upon him.
I acknowledge the talent. I just don't think he'll be consistent enough to deliver the value. I think he'll be more boom or bust on a week-to-week basis.
Lower floor, maybe, like Ginn.
Yeah, I mean, yes. Ginn doesn't have the physicality, obviously, that
I'm just saying, like
Pryor does.
Floor-wise. Just
I mean, and if he's going to be my WR1, I would much rather have a steadier guy than Terrell Pryor. But that's my preference. All right, so you're up.
All right. So you went riser then faller. So then I will do faller then riser. Let's see here. All right. So my faller. I am gonna go. See, it's tough because it's so deep, and there isn't a guy that I say how is he ranked. So you know who I'm gonna go with? I'm gonna go with Dez Bryant in Dallas.
Okay.
Dez Bryant every single year, despite the physical ability, despite his talent, and we acknowledge that it's there. We all expect first off, you have to factor in his injury past. You have to factor it in. You can't discount it when you're ranking players. Obviously, Keenan Allen, you would put him all the way down the list. I guess they just attribute his injuries to freakish things, whatever. But Dez Bryant, every year, we're waiting for him to have that top 5 receiver type put up those type numbers. Over 100 catches and, 1,400 yards and 10-plus touchdowns. It's never happened. It's not going to happen again this year. You're going to say, well, no Elliott. Assuming no Elliott, they're going to be throwing the ball more, right? Hold the phone, folks, unnecessarily. First off, Dak Prescott and Dez Bryant never developed any kind of rapport last year. I know Bryant was hurt for a little bit, but they never developed any kind of rapport or chemistry. You can say, well, that might have changed now that they had another offseason where Dak was taking all the first-team reps. That's fine. I'm not saying that Bryant, that there's no chemistry there. And I'm not saying that Bryant, if he plays every single week, if he plays a full slate of games, that he's not going to put up pretty good numbers. He is not a top 10 receiver in my book. I think you can actually rank him as low, potentially in like the low teens. I won't go any lower than that, but do not overpay for Dez Bryant. Do not buy into the whatever hype is being bestowed upon him now that, he's healthy and he's, and he's motivated and yada, yada. I'm not one who's sold on him yet.
There's just games where he gets shut down by the number one corner on the opposing team, and he hasn't overcome.
Shut down by Jenkins in the Giant game last year. Did nothing.
And so if you want to be considered a top, 7 receiver as where he's going, you have to win those battles. I mean, that's all there is to it.
He's talented, but I do not. He is not a top 10 receiver in my book. So,
all right,
lower him on your rankings list, folks. All right,
folks. Yes, we got such folksy listeners for episode 69.
Yes,
40 minutes deep into fantasy crap.
Yeah, we're so hipster and folksy in these parts, these unknown parts of metropolitan New York City.
All right, your big riser. Who you getting? A little episode?
Right. I could cop out and say Danny Amendola in the light of the Edelman injury. I won't do that though. Let's see here. Who I'm going to go for? Our old friend John Brown in Arizona, ranked below by Matthew Barry, ranked below Robbie Anderson. How about that? John Brown is a smallish wide receiver, but he is tough as nails. I love the way this guy plays. Injuries have been the only thing that have derailed him.
Sickle cell. I mean, that's the right. Sorry to cut you off.
That's it.
That's the big question mark. Ty Montgomery also has sickle cell.
Yeah, and as of now, they're not expecting Brown to miss. I mean, he's been playing he's been practicing, playing in the preseason. So if he is healthy come the start of the season and he maintains his health. Write it down right now. Yeah. He's going, you start to see a wider disparity as you get into like the 40s and 50s with these guys. On this list, he's ranked 50. I'm sure he's in the 45 to 55, maybe even 60, on those lists. He has the potential to be a top 30 receiver. If Carson Palmer remembers to throw the ball to the red team this year, unlike last year where he was miserable and couldn't hit anybody in his wide receiver core for the first however many weeks of the season, if he has his head on straight and he's playing well enough, Carson Palmer, John Brown may actually overtake Larry Fitzgerald this year for best wide receiver on the team. I know other guys like J.J. Nelson, right? Isn't that the other wide receiver?
And Jerron Brown.
Jerron Brown. John Brown is, in my opinion, right now the second best receiver on that team. He may surpass Larry Fitzgerald by the time the year is over. You want to try and get good value if you're in an auction league and don't reach for him in a draft, but I think he could be a top 30 receiver. Very good speed, tough as nails, runs all the tough routes, makes all the tough catches. I've seen plenty from him to know that he is better than where he's being ranked. In that offense, Bruce Arians, Palmer, if he plays well, David Johnson, all that. Give me John Brown to rise up.
Bruce Arians 2 weeks ago expressed his frustration publicly about how John Brown just can't get on the field. And he's like, we're going to use the players that are going to be on the field.
Oops.
So
derails the lips argument a little
bit. No. Let me finish my thought. So this past weekend, what some dub as the dress rehearsal, week 3 of the preseason.
Keep that phrase in mind, folks.
Yes. John Brown scored 2 touchdowns. So, and he looked like his slithering explosive self. And I do have him bold and exclamation pointed on my list. So I totally am in tandem with you and John. I mean, look, it's all about value. Like, if you get him as your WR5, that's a great pick, because the cost is next to nothing. He has a massive downside, though. You can't get him as your second or third receiver.
Course.
Because he, at any moment, the sickle cell apparently causes dehydration and slows down the body's recovery from other injuries, and it's tough to predict when it's going to. So there's a much added element of injury risk to John Brown, but the talent is undeniable, and at that cost, it's hard to argue.
Yep, like I said, the injury risk, you have to factor it in. But if he stays healthy, I think so. Then the hip agrees. Okay, so John Brown, again, good value. Go out and get him. All right.
I just want to come full circle. So we're not going to do tight ends. I think we got to move on here. We're unless this is some tight end that you really want to talk about. I don't. I really do not.
Let's see here. Nah, I guess not. Well, I actually, Evan Ingram of the Giants, I understand that the Giants have Beckham, they have Marshall, they have Shepard, and their offensive line suspect. I understand. And Ingram, they may have to keep in if he's on the field and block every now and again, even though his blocking is a little suspect. Evan Ingram is the real deal. I saw him in a highlight on Saturday night against the Jets, abused Darren Lee, who just completely got turned around on the play by Ingram. Ingram is a physical freak of nature. The Giants are going to incorporate him in that offense. If it's early on, maybe he's not seeing as many targets. He will be a guy that if he's not taken in your league, look to pick him up week 4, 5, 6, somewhere around there, and stash him if you need to. If you can do that, he will be a bigger part of that offense come the latter part of the season.
So I made a point before about the dress rehearsal for the third preseason game, and this is a good opportunity to just get in this quote. So Bill Belichick was asked about if he subscribes to this idea that the third preseason game is the dress rehearsal for the regular season. And his answer, no. I don't know why anybody would say that in all honesty.
In that monotone voice, of course.
I've watched I've watched every game in the league over the last 3 weeks, and there is very little scheme in any of those games. So players are basically, particularly in our game against Detroit, we ran our basic plays. They ran their basic plays. There was very little scheming in that game. So he's not a big and it's just interesting because I think, the media builds up the significance of the third preseason game, I think, to get more people to watch. But and you do see the starters play into the third quarter. I think maybe it's more of a conditioning thing as opposed to game planning. Well,
teams don't.
Right.
The teams don't do anything. This is what running. Yeah, our basic plays. We're
just
running
getting guys
on
the field.
And that's what made Hackenberg. We talked about Hackenberg's quote last week about how Detroit studied their game film. That's what makes his quote all the more ridiculous. And I guess maybe that's why the Jets decided, Christian, if you think that the teams are game planning for you in the second preseason game, maybe you really aren't ready to be an NFL quarterback.
Right.
So that's why he'll be riding the pine, at least in the early going, while the Jets.
They're going to roll out Josh McCown.
Watch out, AFCs.
I picked the Buffalo defense solely for the reason that, for
Jay Cutler, Josh McCown. Oh, just
week
for week 1.
one.
All right. I thought you were going to say looking forward to the season.
I didn't need to look in my one league as a defense to have on your team. So Matt Forte in the Jets-Giants game this past weekend, I believe it was the first 27 snaps that he was on the field for the Jets offense.
All right.
Bilal Powell was playing late into the third quarter in this game. It included like an 85-yard touchdown. Mind-boggling usage for a guy that is somebody you really kind of need in the backfield this year. I mean, Forte looked better than people expected. I mean, he wasn't blowing people away, but he was actually grinding out some yards. I don't want to read too much in the preseason, so I think Forte is going to have a bigger role than people really think. Because
super sleeper Bilal Powell. Bilal, everybody loves Bilal.
He's not a super sleeper though.
Everybody thinks that he could potentially overtake Forte.
Well, when you say
Everybody's
super sleeper,
very down on Forte.
He's still he's ranked as like a 26th running. He's ranked higher than Forte is.
Okay, well there you go.
Yeah, on the list. So we're past that.
Yeah, be careful there. I mean, I think Bilal Powell. Whenever he touches the ball, he usually makes something happen. But that's the type of guy that he is. You use him in small doses. He's not a guy that can touch the ball. Like Le'Veon, he's never handled that type of grind before. So if you're going to deploy him as a flex guy or a guy you'll have fill in on bye weeks, that's fine. But be careful with either back. I mean, be careful with Forte too if you think that Forte has a lot left in the tank because I think he will be a somewhat productive back when he plays, but it's just that whole Jet offense. If you had to name someone right now for somebody to take, if you had to take one Jets player, it's like I don't know who I'm looking at there. It's like everybody is on almost the same level, the same playing field.
So JPP looked dominant at the beginning of that game. And anything more you want to say about him or any other items about the Giants?
Well, I mean, so Beckham. I guess before we get to the game, so Beckham, of course, everybody wants to know. There's still day-to-day, who knows, expect him to play week 1. McAdoo is, I will say, and the one thing about McAdoo, he's still kind of learning how to handle the media. And, he's been a little obnoxious in his quote. He was actually quoted as saying, about Beckham, when he's able to go, we'll take him back. It's a medical decision. I'm hopeful he'll play Tuesday because he was asked if he'll be back for week 1. I'm hopeful he'll play Tuesday. And, but it was like he said it like in an obnoxious way. So, let's tone it down there with I'm not going to give you a real answer. I'm just going to be cryptic in my remarks. If he's not healthy or if he's not ready yet, just say, hey, he'll come back when he's ready. It sounds like, though, the injury is not at least something that'll be keeping him out through the first week. Of course, it's who knows. It's like the NHL mystery of the injury. Oh, where is it? How long? It's a secret, folks. Thank you. Brandon Marshall was back on the practice field, so good news. You mentioned JPP. I have not, and I saw a few. I didn't watch the game, but I saw some highlights. JPP looks like 2011 JPP when I watched him dominate the league. He was arguably the best defensive player in the NFL that year. I watched him against Dallas Cowboys that year absolutely destroy a game in early December that kind of catapulted the Giants on their way to their second Super Bowl in the Eli Manning era. He looks like that JPP. If he and Vernon are going full steam, and we're going to get the JPP that we've seen in the early going, that Giant defense has the makings of a top defense in this league. When you factor in the two ends, Landon Collins, you worry about the corner depth. And actually, it was funny. The Daily News will Darrell Revis get a call from the Giants? Will they dare reach out to Revis Island that had a very, very large isthmus attached to it where all the wide receivers are running to and stomping all over it. So we'll wait and see with that. I'm not going to speculate on if they bring in anybody, but you might see them bring in a veteran, whether it's Revis or somebody else. Eli Apple, 2 sprained ankles, not good. They had high expectations for him this year, and I think they would much rather deploy Rogers Cromartie in a kind of a versatile jack-of-all-trades role, even if it doesn't include free safety, but just play him in the slot, play him outside, but also play him, somewhat limited snaps as opposed to Jenkins or Apple if he's healthy. But makings of a phenomenal defense, offensive line, still a concern. Brent Jones substituted for John Jerry. I think by the second quarter, they had taken out Jerry and put in Jones. Read into that as you will, but that Giant offensive line still gives you the shakes if you're a Giant fan because they still look very inconsistent at times.
Well, we'll do a more full preview of the Giants next week and do our NFL predictions for the season. Maybe do some over-unders.
The over-unders.
Yeah, yes. So we're watching we got on the background here the Yankees and the Indians in a pitching duel. The Yankees just took a 2-1 lead on Corey Kluber. Facing Luis Severino. I think each team had 1 hit through 4 innings. So nice. It's a fun pitcher's duel and maybe a playoff series preview if the Yankees can hang on.
Overtake the Red Sox, yes. Yeah, that'll be your American League divisional series if they win the division.
Can the Yankees pitching hold on? They're starting pitching. That's the question.
Yes. Right now, if Tanaka's looked good. He looked really good yesterday. Early going, wasn't hitting his spots, but he got stronger as the game went along. If you have him, Gray, and Severino as your top three, and they're all going strong, there is no reason to think that the Yankees can maybe. We'll get into the playoffs as we get closer. Right now, their goal is the Red Sox. They're 2 back in a loss. The Red Sox just got swept by the Orioles at home. We talked about how the Red Sox were playing so much better and how amazing they were playing at home. Well, get swept by the Orioles at home. Now all of a sudden the Yankees are zoning in on the Red Sox. The Red Sox will come to town this coming Labor Day for 4. Sale gets to go Sunday, so ESPN, and I'm sure, is very happy that they get to showcase Chris Sale in the Yankee-Red Sox 8 o'clock matchup on Sunday. But let's see a week from today, next Memorial Day, Labor Day, let's see where the Yankees are at that point. And if they are still within a couple of games of the Red Sox, it'll be a very fun last month in the American League East. And for all you Yankee fans, Aaron Judge, a couple of nights off. I'm not going to read into that. If they want to chalk this up to fatigue, his struggle's fine. He's still striking out a ton and still looks at times like he's lost the plate. I'm sure the couple days can only help him. They have Castro and Bird back, so all of a sudden their lineup looks a lot deeper. Holiday eventually, I'm sure, will come back, but their bullpen was good, really good over the weekend. Starting pitching really good over the weekend, and that the offense should be there if everybody's healthy, and some of the guys are clicking, which has been the case when they've had a full lineup. Has been the case really all throughout the year.
I'm just going to move on here to the biggest sporting event this weekend.
I'm sorry. One other thing. Did you catch any of the? And I know it's a few days have passed. Any of the brawl between the Yankees and the Tigers?
It was a day game. I wasn't watching it live. It was a day game.
Like the highlights?
A little bit. Yeah. With the punches thrown, Sanchez and Michael Fulmer. I guess he was the one that hit somebody first after a home run, and Yankees retaliated, blah, 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 multiple fights, multiple suspensions.
So the reason I brought it up, and I wanted to get out my opinion on this. So here's what drives me insane when it comes to umpiring today. So in the game, Sanchez hit another home run, and he's embarrassed. He hits 4 home runs in the series. He's embarrassing the Tigers. The Tigers say, all right, enough's enough. Fulmer hits Sanchez. Fulmer can say whatever he wants. He was absolutely throwing at Sanchez. But you know what? That happens. A guy is absolutely obliterating another team. They're getting embarrassed. They're going to take umbrage with it, and they're going to throw inside to brush him off or hit him. And that's exactly what happened. They hit Sanchez. Everybody and their mother knew that it was intentional. Now, when the umpire decided that he was not going to warn both benches, that means that the Yankees are fair game to retaliate. So what happens? Conley, the relief pitcher, he throws behind Miguel Cabrera, debate as to whether or not it hit him. Of course, Cabrera's upset. Cabrera had been doing nothing Cabrera's done nothing all year. He's been miserable for a first ballot Hall of Famer in Miguel Cabrera. But throws behind him. Cabrera's incensed, livid that you're throwing at him. And then the umpire decides to throw Conley, or immediately throws Conley out of the game. That spurns Girardi to come out of the dugout, absolutely furious. And you know what? He was absolutely right. If you're in the context and the situation in the game, you know that they just hit your star player intentionally. Of course, you're expecting the other team to retaliate. That's what happened. That's when you say, okay, got one in. Warnings. The Yankees would not have been furious. You wouldn't have seen Girardi come out of the dugout. There's no delay after Conley's thrown out of the game where Chapman's warming up, and now Roman's still yelling, and then Cabrera gets in his face, and all hell breaks loose. The umpire did a terrible job there. That is 100% on the home plate umpire. You cannot throw Conley out of the game. You have to understand the situation. I couldn't believe that he threw him out there, and that really wasn't talked about. It was, oh, he should have warned him the first time. After Sanchez was hit. That's fine. If he wants to do that, that's fine. I actually like not warning. Give the other team an opportunity, and then once they do, now you stop it. I couldn't believe that the umpire handled it that badly. That's 100% on the home plate umpire. Suspensions, Romine 2 games, which I thought was ridiculous. Sanchez 4 games for cheap sucker punching, Cabrera and Castellanos, whatever. He was wrong.
I wonder if the lip would have spoken as emphatically about the umpire's handling situation if it was the Yankees who hit the Tigers batter first, and then with no warning, and then the Tiger pitcher hits the Yankee batter.
Well, it actually just happened a few weeks ago when the Tigers were here. They hit Ellsbury because what's his face was hit like twice in the head. I forget exactly.
James McCann was hit.
McCann was hit by Betances unintentionally, and then he gets thrown out of the game. And that was actually part of the problem was the wildness of the Yankee relievers that day, and that's why they lost. But I wasn't going to rehash the whole thing. I just wanted to comment on the home run umpire, how he just completely screwed that up. All right.
So let's spend 30 seconds on $700 million.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'm spending not because
you mean Powerball? Powerball, yes. $700 million. Is that what you're referring to?
That was just north of 700 million. Incredible. You'd say whatever you want to say about it. I did not watch it. It wasn't that I was against it. I just didn't want to spend $100, and I didn't care enough to go out. I read about the aftermath and talked to some people that watched it who thought it was a good fight. But I really don't have any firsthand opinion on this. Let's just make it clear. Floyd Mayweather, Conor McGregor, Saturday night.
Oh, of course, yes. In case there was any wonder when we said the fight, and you thought we were talking about the Tiger-Yankee brawl, which was more entertaining, I will say. But so I talked about maybe, what was it, like a month and a half ago, and shortly after they announced this abomination of a sporting event. And I still will use that word to describe it, despite the fact that some people, oh, well, maybe it was good. Oh, it was actually better than we thought, which is, I didn't realize that the event of the century, we strive for better than we thought. Not as bad as I would have first predicted. Well, I actually, and here's one half of your hipster moment of zenith. So I was actually away at a bachelor party over the weekend. And for any of those that attended and will be listening as I was promoting our podcast, I apologize if I was at all disruptive. I was a little under the weather, we'll just say, at the time. So I actually staged a boycott. So the fight was on. I forget exactly. I guess someone ordered it, but it was on. And I boycotted by literally turning in my chair and facing the other direction.
Were you at like somebody's apartment or
no? There was a house. It was a big lake house that we rented for the weekend. So I was facing the other direction when the fight was on, if you can believe that.
And what were you?
I don't know. It was. I guess it was pretty stupid. Oh, just the wall. I had I had my bottle of or my glass of brown in my hand. I think Macallan. I think I had in my hand at the time. So I was just staring at the wall. But because I had enough Macallan and Bitter Hipster beers, of course, that preceded the Macallan, I was. I guess, able to somehow entertain myself by staring at the wall and just listening to the reactions.
Probably did more than just stare at the wall, but we won't dive into the precise entertaining.
Well, I was amongst others, so time and a place, of course. So okay. I may have actually turned around a couple of times. But I guess it was kind of dumb. What was the point of it? Whatever. I did look at some highlights, and I saw, of course, Mayweather wins in the 10th round, TKO. He has McGregor on the ropes. Oh my God, so exciting. I read a couple of things after, again saying, it wasn't as bad as we thought. Oh my God. So I actually decided to watch a few highlights that were posted on YouTube. Each individual round was posted. So I watched some of the early going when everybody was like, oh, McGregor. Oh, he looked so good in the early going. Oh, he had Mayweather a few times. I thought he was Folks, my God. Do you honestly think that Floyd Mayweather was at any point in trouble? First off, Floyd Mayweather, whatever you might think of him, he's going to be on pretty much every single top 10 pound-for-pound boxing list ever. Against a guy that had not fought a professional or even amateur boxing match in his entire life. So to sit there and actually write that Mayweather may have been on the ropes and that McGregor won the early rounds and McGregor may have actually, if he would have done this differently, may have actually had him. Get real, people. Get real. There was never a point. And again, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched a majority of the early going, and then I guess Mayweather took over at the end. Bottom line, if you paid $100 for this and you were mildly entertained for the half hour and you felt afterwards that you got your money's worth, then hey, God bless you. And I'm not going to tell you that you shouldn't. You shouldn't. I understand that. I guess I sound a little condescending right now. I apologize. It's just that I am a boxing fan, and I go back to the days of, if you want to go back to heavyweights, of Lennox Lewis and Riddick Bowe, and you want to throw Mike Tyson's name out there, or watching De La Hoya and Felix Trinidad and Marco Antonio Barrera, and of course.
All right, you're just proving the notion that you're backing up the fact that you're boxing fans. Thank you very much.
But the point is this was never a legitimate boxing match. This was a sham, a farce right from the beginning. Two guys that could collect 9 figures by just standing and dancing in the ring for a couple of minutes, for a half hour, however long it ended up being. Honestly, I mean, Floyd Mayweather gets nothing out of this. 50-0, I could care less about. The one thing is that this may help McGregor in his star power, but now his star power is going to exceed that of the UFC and MMA and all that. So I guess if McGregor wants to use his newfound fame and earning power to fight a sumo wrestler, maybe Thunder Lips like Rocky did in Rocky 3, or maybe he'll fight an elephant for his next performance. Maybe Babar, King of the Elephants, will get in the ring with him. So there you go. There's my take.
That should be your hipster moment of zenith right there.
One half of the hipster moment of zenith. Right. I don't know if you had anything to add on.
No, take your second half. Go.
All right. Well, just really quickly. So I actually thought it was interesting. This couldn't hold up as a hipster moment of zenith on its own, but interesting. A giant defensive end today, Owa Odigizua, I still can't pronounce his name, a former third-round pick, was suspended for steroids. And what's so amazing to me is that there is still zero outrage when it comes to steroids in the NFL. There has always been zero outrage when it comes to steroids in the NFL, unlike the other sport where if someone does steroids, he should be thrown in jail, of course, being baseball. Not that I condone steroids at all, but it's amazing how you still have people don't blink an eye when an NFL player gets suspended. That's not it. So he was suspended, but what's interesting is that the Giants were most likely going to cut him before the start of the season. He was not going to be on the 53-man roster, most likely. So what this actually does is that this gives him an extra life because he is now not going to count against the 53-man roster if they don't cut him. So they can keep him. And then when he's eligible to come back, if there's somebody that gets hurt, gets put on IR, some other guy they want to waive, they could actually bring him back and say, hey, welcome back. Now, you could say, well, they could have done that anyway. Yes, but I think there was a less likelihood of that. So now he actually gains another life by being suspended. So the hipster irony there.
Well, yeah, I mean, still, if he gets another suspension, though, isn't it like a half a season ban or something? Or I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
It's it's not like it's all good for him. It's like
I'm just saying, in the immediate short term,
yeah, okay, fair enough.
It's probably good for him that he is not. That the Giants don't have to think about him until October 2nd, whenever he's eligible to come back. All right. So anything else to add before we move on to our final segment? No. Well, then that will, of course, take us to the final segment of the week. Everybody's favorite, yours and mine. Of course, that would be the hipster beer of the week. And take it away, Mr. Hip.
Yeah, so I was out with my boss, although he'll say there's no titles in our group, last week, and I brought him to a bitter hipster beer bar in the Lower East Side. Incredible selection. They must have had about 10 local IPAs on draft, all the microbreweries. It was phenomenal. Ooh. But there was a brewery on that list I had never heard of, and so I looked it up. Garvey's Point Brewery in Glen Cove. Never heard of these guys.
Glen Cove. That's Long Island for those that are not familiar.
Glen Cove, Long Island. I've never heard of them. It doesn't mean that they're crappy. I think that just none of their kegs really get out. Apparently, it was the bar owner knows the owner of the Vietnamese restaurant next door, who knows the brewer at Garvey's Point, and they had a sour on draft. I thought it was really good. It's called Sour Batch Tiki No. 1, a tart and juicy dry hop kettle sour with over 120 pounds of pureed pink guava, mangoes, and passion fruit, added post-fermentation for a pleasant and tropical experience. Koatsu hops were added in the whirlpool, and Citra in the dry hop to complement the tartness from the lactobacillus.
Oh, wait, from the lactobacillus? Oh, I'm sold.
So get ready to pucker up, and get ready to pucker up next week as we do our full NFL preview show. We have our league, Jim Nantz Sundays fantasy football auction next Tuesday night. So the episode should be recorded next Wednesday night. We'll do some over-unders and some Jets Giants, the full preview, just leading up right to before the Patriots take on
the Chiefs, right?
Is it the Chiefs?
I believe so, yes. Kareem Hunt will be featured as the Spencer Ware out for the year. Oh, my God.
National television, or probably the NFL Network, if you consider that national television.
I guess that's an NBC game, right?
Oh, is it an NBC? It's the first game of the year. Makes sense. All right. So it'll be Collinsworth and
get ready for Alan Chris. Yes, Alan Chris.
Good team. I like those guys. I enjoy them.
Chris is okay. Every now and again, he'll say something. I'll just kind of like cringe. I'll go, "What are you talking about?"
All right, yeah. Well,
you know what? Every single NFL commentator,
right? And just like every other analysis point that comes out of your mouth, we're all cringing. So it's just
if you're not cringing the whole show, then I question I question your reflexes.
All right. Well.
Every single time I talk, you should go, "Ah, God."
So now you're ready to kick ass at your
so abrasive. So our first live show, live meaning that we're in the same room talking next to each other. So please give us your thoughts. Let us know if you love this format. And if you're going to say to the hip, you have to go to the Lips Place every single time.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, in your bedroom. Oh, and on that note.
All right.
Yes.
Fantasy football, enjoy your drafts and auctions right now. All right, bye.
All right, bye.